these cities, you're talking the streets were muddy and cake-filled with grime and dirt and feces. Rats were all over the place. In 1790, right when the country had a first president, we had 2 cities that were over 20,000 people. By 1860, we had 43 cities that were over 20,000 people. So where does this suggest? Where's the population beginning to move? It's to the cities. Whatever word comes in is what's coming out. Test no filter. All right. So because we're having urbanization, that's also going to go along with industrialization, right? Oh God, Cassidy's here. As our country begins to industrialize, thank you, they're going to the cities, okay? All right, so that's what I want you sort of to know. Population is still going up rapidly, doubling every 25 years. Actually, our population now, if it wasn't for immigration today, our population would be reducing. Most Western countries, and by Western I mean industrialized countries, so we're including like South Korea, Australia, and Japan, are having real population problems. And when you take macro next year, you'll see what a big deal this is, but it's a big deal. Japan especially. What's so funny?
Because of the Irish coming over, our country's population was Dublin.
That is good. It's corny, but it's good. All right. Now, what do we know about the Irish coming over already that I taught you today?
They were poor.
All right, they're definitely poor. Would this be more of a, you should have learned about push and pull migration, right? Was this a push or a pull migration? They're being pushed by what? By famine. Or lack of potatoes, really. The thing is, think about this rationally. Why would anyone want to leave Ireland unless there was famine? Right? They had to be being pushed out. No place can pull the Irish with something better that's being offered.
Maybe like beaches and good weather.
We have both of those in Ireland. Just a smaller amount of both. Do what?
It's
Ireland is an island. You don't think there's a beach on the whole country? No, just no. I will say that there probably is per person more sunscreen sold in Ireland than in other parts of the world. We're not a tan group. Okay. What other types of people? Let's explain the type of people who are coming over. It's really changing the face of America. Tiger, Sweeney. What are these people? McCarty? Catholic. And I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this because I'm Catholic. This is going to be a huge changing factor in American history because this was largely a Protestant country, still is, but it was overwhelmingly Protestant. And now you've got dirty, poor Catholics coming over. The worst kind. Dirty, poor Catholics coming mostly to the cities. They're going to work for whatever because they don't have any food. So what happens to the wages of people who were already here? They begin to decrease. And so now Americans are beginning to hate the Irish. The Irish were really resented for some reason. In fact, there's a really interesting study done about the issue of race. And many historians have said that race is less about skin color and more about socioeconomic status and relationship to other people. So to be a different color isn't about race, isn't about skin color as much as it is about your level of social hierarchy, right? So for a long time, people considered Irish black, and then Italians, and then Irish became white as they got richer as a group, and then when the Italians came over, they were considered black. Now this can also be considered a historical fallacy in the fact that black people have gotten moved up the socioeconomic ladder, but they're still black, right? And what that means is Americans have made white sound good and black sound bad, right? Can you see the inherent racism within how Americans just see people in general? Okay? And so now we're actually starting to see that, right? There are definitely different types of people. They're considered a different race. Do you know who the Irish hated the most? In America, who they hated the most?
German.
They hate black people the most. Why does it make sense? Well, it makes sense. It's not a good thing. But why might it be logical for Irish to dislike black people in America?
Were they grouped together?
Do what?
They're being compared to the black people?
They were competing with black people for jobs, right? Both were on the lowest part of socioeconomic status level. So what ends up happening is you tend to hate those people you're competing against. If, for instance, in today, what type of people tend to be most anti-immigrant? Working class people or well-educated people? Working class people tend to be more anti-immigrant. Why?
Taking the job.
Because they're the ones competing for jobs, right? I don't think that Dr. Cooper's like, crap, all this immigration, I might not be a pediatrician ever again, right? These aren't problems, but people who work on farms, people who work in factories, they are having real competition, right? So that's the thing. Okay. Another thing that Americans, Protestants specifically, are going to hate of the Irish is the level of political corruption. It's a real thing. What ends up happening is, as the Irish are coming over, this will also happen to the Italians, as the Irish are coming over in droves, we're talking 1840s through 1860s, individually speaking, they have no real political power. So how can the Irish exercise their power? By voting in huge numbers. And so what ends up happening is machine politics. Remember we talked about that before, machine politics? You have these giant areas of cities that are all Irish, and they're run by a boss. The most famous of which in New York is a political machine called Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall ran the Irish for years in these huge neighborhoods. It's Tammany. The N is not as apparent as maybe it should be. And so the Irish were seen, they're Democrats, they're working class, they're poor, they're dirty, they're Catholic, and they're corrupt. They're everything that WASPs can't stand. What's a WASP? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? So now you start seeing this, and one of the real fears that Protestants are going to start having, especially when the Italians come over, is being outnumbered and outvoted by these Catholics. Because these people, what do we know about Catholic families, Gilkison? What's the size of many of them, especially a long time ago?
11 plus.
Yeah, there's tons and tons and tons of them, right?
One pew per.
There's a kid I have in my fifth block named Jordan Arnold. You guys know Jordan? He and his sister are in the same grade, right? Morgan and Jordan are, but they're not twins. They're called Irish. Well, I don't know if they're Irish, but the nickname is Irish twins. Do you know what Irish twins are? When you have two kids born in the same year, right? That's Irish twins, because people are just getting pregnant all the time. It's scaring the bejesus out of WASPs because you're getting outnumbered. And actually, it's what happened in cities. Catholicism is the largest is the largest Christian religion in America now, much to the chagrin of many voters over the time, right? Italians and Irish people really amped up the numbers. And a lot of that was because of massive amounts of population shift due to huge families. Now let's talk about the Germans. This is a much less exciting time for our country, trust me. The Germans, how can we... First of all, the Irish are going more to cities. Germans, how many of you guys know much about college sports? Know a little bit about college sports? Germans are not going to cities as much as what we might call the Big Ten states, right? Germans are going, what are our Big Ten states?
Indiana.
Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nebraska, right? Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois. They're going to these areas up here. The Germans who are coming over are, on average, much better educated than the Irish. Not smarter, just better educated. By the way, if you're curious, I looked it up last night. Irish people, on average, are a half-inch taller than the English people, on average. Put that out there. I looked up everyone's height in the world just to see.
English are just tiny.
You ever get to that point where, like, you don't want to go to bed, so you just start searching things in Wikipedia, right? That's where I ended up, on average height of people around the world. That was my last one. I was like, dear God, Corey, I think it's time to call this quits. I don't want to talk about it. Who do you think will be the tallest?
Scandinavian, South African.
Yeah. The Eastern European and Nordic countries are the tallest.
Vikings.
Yeah. And the Netherlands, which is not Nordic nor Eastern European, but they are on average almost 6 foot. Denmark is really tall. Estonia, or no, the Czech Republic is really tall. Yeah. I think when it said Germany, when it said Swiss, especially it said Swiss Germans, it just said useless. I don't know what that means.
She's single.
It's short, it's fine.
No, a lot of height actually tends to do with nutrition, right? Nutrition and early nutrition, and a lot of socioeconomic status actually comes into play with height. I think India is one of the shortest. I think the average height in India is 5'5". That's of a male.
We have the largest belly curve.
I don't know. There are a couple countries in Africa that are also pretty small, like Malawi has a really small population too.
Our diet causes us to go this way.
We definitely expand horizontally rather than vertically. Although I don't know that we're the fattest country, but we might be.
Yeah, we know.
Germany actually is up there. Germany's actually been getting worse as crappy American food is making its way across the Atlantic.
I thought Mexico was the biggest one now, like Mexico.
No, although Texas is the fattest state.
Yeah.
And the most useless state. The most useless state. All right. Also, so Germans are more educated. They're coming into more agricultural areas. They're also coming over for different reasons. Those of you who took AP World last year, I don't know if regular World's able to have this, but you remembered about the 19th century revolutions happening in Germany and Italy. That was, some of that political fire was pushing people out of Germany and going towards America for things like religious freedom and tolerance. So they're coming over for a little bit different reasons than the Irish, who are being pushed out due to lack of potato. They're going to bring a couple things over that are going to be really important. First of all, early childhood education. You've heard of kindergarten, obviously, is a German idea. Teaching kids early. Today, all research indicates the earlier you can get your child in school and doing stuff, the better long term. The Irish are going to not be anti-slave, but the Germans will on average be very moralistic in their anti-slavery approach on average. That's not to say that every German is an abolitionist, but it is to say that Germans were much more active politically on moral reforms. That being said, what is one cultural anomaly the Germans and the Irish have in common that what we call nativist Americans did not like on average?
Alcohol?
Yeah, alcohol. Alcohol is an important part of the German and the Irish culture. And it just is. I know it kind of sounds like it's a stereotype, but it's not a stereotype. You've been to Germany, right? When did kids start going to beer halls in Germany? Yeah, I've seen a kid who was at least no more than 12 or 13 drinking in a beer hall, right? It's not uncommon to see that. In Ireland, at lunch, when you're on lunch, you go to a pub and you get a beer at lunch, right? You get a pint at lunch. Alcohol is seen very differently in those countries than it is here, right? It's demonized much more, especially in a little more Protestant areas than it is in Catholic areas. And you can look at something like Louisville, for instance. For a long time in Kentucky, the only place you could buy alcohol on a Sunday was in Louisville, right? And that was also the most Catholic place. Louisville's highly Catholic. German and Irish people were targeted because of the alcohol part of their culture. Later, Jewish people will also be too, Italians with wine. For the Germans and Irish, it's not so much wine or bourbon as it is, yeah, these are beer people, right? And I don't know how your families are. I know in my family, that's a big part of our family. Like, it is a big part. It literally is an important part. If we didn't have liquor and beer at my wedding, no one would come. Right? They would have gone somewhere else. We have kegs at our funerals, right? When someone dies, somebody buys a keg, right? Beer is ubiquitous. Every time we have a religious thing, somebody gets first communion or gets confirmed or it's a Tuesday, whatever in our family, someone buys beer and it's all over the place. I don't know how Sweeney, your or McCarty or Gilkinson, is that a big part of your family? Like, it's just, is that not or yes or? Yeah, it's part of it. I mean, in the Catholic service, I know a lot of Protestants, you have like during communion, you have like grape juice or whatever. But my daughter has been drinking wine since she was 7. Right? At communion, it's real wine. She doesn't like it, so she doesn't drink it much. But it's because it's kind of ubiquitous, and it was feared. A lot of Protestants, and rightly so, feared that a lot of these immigrants were poor and using lots of their wages instead of helping their families. What were they doing with that money?
Getting beer.
We're getting alcohol. Is alcoholism a real issue amongst Irish Americans?
Yeah.
Yes, it really is. So as much as I said alcohol is part of the culture, it's also a bad part of the culture on some level too. The joke, I forget the joke about something about the Irish taking over the world if there wasn't beer. It stops Irish from being particularly, I was going to say, it keeps them from being ambitious, right? Has anyone been to Ireland before? It's, the stereotype isn't a stereotype. On Friday in the Temple Garden area, everyone is hammered at 5. It's not like midnight or 1. Like at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Temple Garden is crazy, and people drink early. They get off early on Fridays, they drink. When you live over there, I don't know what it's like in Switzerland, but having a beer at lunch is not ridiculous. Like, maybe it is, I don't know. In Ireland, when you go to a pub at noon, it's tons of workers, right? Whether they're lawyers or businessmen or factory workers, whatever else. You get off, you go to a pub, you get a sandwich, you get a pint, and then you go back. In America, that would be ridiculous. What if I got a beer at lunch? What would happen to me? I'd be fired automatically, right? I'd be fired automatically. You would not over there. So, at my church, I can't tell you how much alcohol has been served at my church. How many times I've drank at my church. For Protestants, that's ridiculous, right? It's a ridiculous thing. Yes.
Has the priest ever came to one of your parties and just like grabbed a beer and started drinking?
Our priest has, Father Danny drinks. His mom, he's not a big party guy. You know Father Danny.
Yeah.
His mom liked to drink before she died. She liked to drink. And I've bought her alcohol before. I think I've seen Father Danny at one of our fundraisers have a
Who
beer.
was the one before Father Danny?
Father Dan.
Yeah, he was. He was a good guy.
Father Dan's great. He's the priest at Mary Queen now. You don't make fun of Father Dan. Poor Danny. Okay, what's the number say on that? Don't be scared.
1820.
Stop it and start it.